would soon be cast in a new light for those who lived by the Quran. At the high point of the Abbasid Empire, armies from Christian Europe would go on the march, and a series of battles for the holy city of Jerusalem would begin. The Crusades. In the 10th and 11th centuries, from Spain to India, two holy books served as the spiritual guides for millions of people: the Bible and the Quran. Led by the Quran, Muslim leaders ruled over several vast empires, huge cities of wealth and culture, centers of knowledge and art. Christian Europe, however, was languishing in what were known as the Dark Ages. Still, the two faiths and their texts had much in common. Islam views the followers of Christianity and Judaism as fellow people of the book who believe in the same God. Chapter 2, verse 62. Surely those who believe, and those who are Jews and Christian, whoever believes in God and the last day and does good, they shall have their reward from God. The Quran also contains many references to biblical figures. Chapter 57, verse 27. Then we followed up these messengers with Jesus, son of Mary, to whom we gave the gospel, and we put in the hearts of his followers kindness and mercy. But in the Muslim world, European culture was not held in very high regard.
The Muslims had had a very clear idea of what the peoples of Northern Europe were like. They were of the wrong religion, they were boorish, they were unhygienic, they were like lumbering animals.
These two worlds were about to come into bloody conflict over one of the most sacred places on earth, Jerusalem, a city holy to Christians, Jews, and Muslims. After Mecca and Medina, the third most sacred city in Islam is Jerusalem. There, the Dome of the Rock marks the site where tradition holds Muhammad ascended to heaven. For centuries after the death of the Prophet in 632 AD, Jerusalem was ruled by Arab Muslims who had spread the message of the Quran throughout the region. Then, near the end of the 11th century, Turkish Muslims took control of the city.
The Turks are not Arabs. They're a separate ethnic group, but they're Muslims. Then they moved down south through Syria and in 1077 conquered Jerusalem from the Arabs.
The Turkish Empire was also expanding west and soon posed a direct threat to Christian Europe. The Byzantine Church, situated near the edge of the Turkish Empire, was the first to feel the pressure. In 1095, Byzantium made an urgent request for assistance from fellow Christians in Rome.
The Byzantine emperor sent a message to the Pope in Europe saying that he needed help to defend his frontiers against the incursions of the Turks who were coming ever closer to Constantinople, his capital.
Pope Urban II agreed to the military assistance and appealed to powerful knights throughout Europe to go and fight. To motivate them, Pope Urban framed the conflict as a battle between the faiths and their sacred texts.
Urbanus packages this together with an appeal not only just to push the Turks out of Asia Minor, but to continue on and push the Turks completely out of the regions that they had taken, including Syria, but most importantly, Jerusalem.
In 1096, the First Crusade was launched. More than 50,000 Christian peasants and some 7,000 knights set forth from Europe on a march toward the Holy Land. After a punishing 3-year journey, they reached the hills overlooking Jerusalem and laid siege to the city. The siege lasted a month, during which more than 1,000 crusaders died from both combat and disease. Then, on July 15th, 1099, the Christians broke through the walls that surrounded Jerusalem and poured into the city.
There was no love lost between these people. The Crusaders, who had now been for 3 years on the road to get to this place, and who had spent many weeks now outside of Jerusalem thinking they were about to die. And when they went in there, it was a pretty brutal sack of the city.
There is no doubt on both sides of the historiography for this event that the Crusaders were exceptionally bloodthirsty. The memory of the brutality of the Crusaders is still with Muslims today.
In the aftermath of what was a devastating defeat, many looked to the Quran for answers.
Immediately after the coming of the First Crusade, religious scholars were assembling and saying to themselves, reading the holy text, "What have we done wrong? Why have we incurred God's displeasure?"
In the Quran, one concept proved to be key as Muslims tried to understand how they had lost one of their holiest cities and how they might be able to win it back. They turned to jihad, or struggle, and laid the groundwork for their own holy war.
Islam at that point did not have any equivalent of the holy war. This is how the very word jihad changed its meaning as a result of the Crusades.
But Muslims would not launch their holy war until nearly a century later, with the rise of two warriors who would use jihad as their rallying cry. Nur ad-Din was a powerful leader who, in 1146, took control of parts of what are now Syria and Jordan. A deeply religious man, he immersed himself in the study of the Quran.
Everywhere he went, he took with him religious scholars, Quran readers, mystics, inspiring the troops, reading out relevant verses of the Quran to do with jihad.
Chapter 9, verse 14. Fight them. God will chastise them at your hands, and he will lay them low and give you victory over them. For Nur ad-Din, these passages were taken as a call to arms to win back Jerusalem. Nur ad-Din's interpretation of jihad resonated with his subjects who were eager to defeat the Europeans. When a second Crusader army, launched from Europe in 1145, reached the lands controlled by Nur ad-Din, it was roundly defeated. Nur ad-Din's victories were an inspiration to those around him, including his deputy, a young warrior who was also a devout student of the Quran, his name Saladin.
He worked really for the spiritual rebirth of the region. And so he was a very religious man. One of his friends said that he thought of God and also the jihad all the time. And if you weren't talking to him about that, he didn't want to talk to you.
In 1174, as momentum was building towards an all-out assault to recapture Jerusalem, Nur ad-Din died. The reins of power were taken over by Saladin, who began making plans for his attack on the holy city. But first, Saladin would have to face the Crusaders in a bloody and decisive battle outside Jerusalem. On a dry mountain plateau, under a parching desert sun, Saladin and his troops would be comforted by verses from the Quran as they prepared to meet the enemy. July 4th, 1187. Sunrise on the Hattin Plateau, a barren expanse of desert 70 miles from the city of Jerusalem. Muslim soldiers were preparing to attack an encampment of Christian crusaders. To inspire his men, the commander, Saladin, ordered a religious advisor